The conversation you are about to hear was recorded in 2020 during the height of the global pandemic. And now, Global Comedy Studios presents, Is This a Bad Time to Talk?
All right, I'm calling my friend Matt Oberg. It's May 18th, 2020. He is a very accomplished, funny actor. You've seen him on tons of stuff. Comedians, The Real O'Neills, so many things, so many roles. And he's just a naturally funny, good guy. And our paths crossed at the Pit in New York City back in the early aughts. So I'm about to give him a... Hello?
Hello?
Matt Oberg?
Ali?
This is he. Hey, is this a bad time to talk?
It's it's fine by me. It's no better or no worse than any other time.
AKA, I'm here to listen, Matt. That's the two tentative names for whatever this is. Because right now it's just a phone call to an old friend. I'm using an old handheld black receiver that I plug into my iPhone to give me that feeling of talking on the phone to an old friend.
Oh, I see. You've got the heft of a receiver. That's cool.
That's right. And I'm right now in New York City. It's around noon, May 18th, 2020, 9-ish your time. If nothing else, you got the day and time out of this.
Yeah. Traffic and weather together.
And you are in Los Angeles right now. Where am I finding you right now, if you can disclose that?
I am in the smallest little pool house in L.A. I'm in my backyard. We've got a little office back here that is now also a first grade classroom. But this is where I go to hide. It's I would say 15 feet by 10 feet. It's be a large bathroom in a restaurant.
I like the sounds of that. Now, would that be a place where, 50-ish old friend who really, kind of, identifies more as a 25-year-old Caucasian male could hang out for a little bit, stay?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the only issue with this place is that there is no plumbing. So in terms of your bathroom needs, I had actually installed a motion-activated Purell dispenser around the back. So you can go relieve yourself in the dirt and then wash your hands with Purell. But since the pandemic, I have moved the Purell dispenser inside our main residence.
Okay. All right. I mean, but I'm sure there's, eventually a coffee shop or someplace where I can, find a place to, take care of my needs there.
Sure. I'm always here for you. Where are you right now?
I'm in New York City. My friend, he quarantined down in Virginia, and he has a studio apartment on 23rd, and I come here, and this is where I kind of, make base because my daughters, one of them is staying in my parents' studio with me, and she homeschools there. The other one is at our apartment, and she homeschools there. So Daddy's got to vacate, and going to any of the four businesses has become depressing. So I try to go. Well, it's just you go there and you just after a while, I was like, oh, it's not these spaces that I was attached to. It's the people who came in and out of these spaces. And it's just I don't know if the reality of what's going to happen, because apparently landlords didn't get the memo of we're all in this together. Someone didn't shoot him that email.
I mean, bless their heart, they're trying, I mean, you think they'll evict you if you don't pay rent?
Oh,
or they'll sue you?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. They love pure rent like a vampire loves blood. I don't know. It's just it's interesting. But again, what I'm doing right now, talking to folks like you, is born out of the virus. I would not have bothered people like yourself with hey, you want to talk on the phone 9 o'clock your time in L.A. for a little bit, And I've talked to, Michael Shannon and Reed Birney and Asif Manvi, and, I've talked to people who I don't think, and Rachel Dratch, I don't think I would have, called them during the BC world and said, hey, let's take a walk down memory lane.
Right. In L.A., we precede those names with You say, Rachel Dratch, Reed Birney, just so you know. Going forward, you want to look professional.
I like that. Do I also say, two-time Academy Award nominee? Do I say, Tony Award winner?
You want? You can, sure.
Oh, man. So you're out there, you're homeschooling your kids, you're waiting for this thing to be done to try to get back to, because you always struck me as a few things. One, naturally funny, always game to play, and a hard worker, a guy who loved to laugh, loved to make people laugh, loved to collaborate, and, you're someone who I consider who's knocking on heaven's door to get something that'll take you to syndication.
I wish you were a DJ right now, just walking into that track there. Anyway, here's a little something. That's very kind of you to say, and I'm excited. I'm very happy to talk to you, and I agree that things like this are a silver lining in the midst of this. But yeah, I think like everybody else, just sort of laying low and biding my time, spending a lot of quality time with the kids, which has yin and yang Miller in it, but has overall I think been a net positive. And in terms of showbiz, yeah, I was cast in a pilot right before all this happened, and I think they'll make announcements this week, maybe what their plans are, but I've done a bunch of those before, and they often throw them in the garbage without a pandemic, so I'm skeptical what's going to happen, but waiting for news on that. And then I've been writing more, and I've been able to do that even while all this is happening. So I've really been lucky in that professionally it's been kind of a busy time for me. So I can't complain in that way. Somehow I once again lucked out.
Well, I mean, you say that thing about the pilots, but there are people who go their whole careers and never get a pilot audition. There are people who go their whole careers and never get a pilot. So, I mean, regardless of what happens to them, yes, of course, you want that pilot to be the thing and it be picked up and whatnot, but that's still, by most people's standards in this business, success. But I hear what you're saying.
Yeah, I'm not complaining. When they don't go, I'm always like, well, it wasn't my fault. But after like the 9th one, I'm like, is it my fault? But, I'm never like the front of the photo shoot. I'm, the squirrel in the back. So,
hey,
yeah. But I'll take it. That's where I want to be.
Hey, I'd be happy just to be number 4 or 5 on the call sheet all the way to syndication.
Oh man, I don't see why you wouldn't want that, You work like 2 days a week, I realize like what I miss most about working as an actor, I think, is the naps you get to take in the little trailer. I'm like, you get this big lunch, and then sometimes they don't need you till like 2 or 3, and those were some nice times.
It's a justified nap in your Star Wagon.
Yeah.
After a sweet
feel like
salmon.
You're doing something. Yeah. You hear the tour bus go by, you're like, hey, I'm somewhere cool.
So our paths crossed in my recollection. The pit started in 2002. And then shortly thereafter, we started teaching classes. And my friend Ramin Bahrani, the director, successful, talented now, which he's done films with, Michael Shannon and tons of stuff. He wanted to teach a class, Michael Shannon and whatnot. And he taught a screenwriting class. And you were the only person who signed up for it.
Unbeknownst to me, yes.
Unbeknownst to you. And Ramin said, there's only one person signed up. If you want, I will teach it, and I'll get a couple other friends to take it so it seems like it's a class. So we built a Potemkin Village class around you to take that class. But what were you doing up to then? I guess that was somewhere in your mid-20s at that point, something like that?
Let's see. Yeah, mid to late 20s. If that was 2002.
2 or 3, yeah.
I was born in 1976, so do the math from there. No one really knows what that number adds up to, but
right.
Yeah.
But I mean, throughout your life, what were those points like where, if we go back in the landscape of your life, are there things you can remember of a time you got on stage when you were in kindergarten, you're like, oh, I like this feeling, or a teacher who told you, you got something, kid?
Yeah, sure. So one of those teachers was this woman named Dee O'Brien, who directed these Shakespeare plays in the high school. She was actually a middle school English teacher and one of the sort of like beloved, cool teachers. And she had taught my older brother, Ted, and Ted had done some of these Shakespeare plays. And I was always sort of drawn to it. And we kind of bonded in her class in middle school. And then she could tell that this was something I was interested in. And I think I was in 8th grade and she was doing Midsummer Night's Dream. And she was like, normally this is only the high school kids, but if you want a part, I was like, oh yeah. She's like, okay, you'll play Peas Blossom, which is like a fairy with one line. I was like, ooh, this is not what I had in mind. And I went to the first little read through, and one of the like older high school kids read my line when it got my one line, and I was very distraught after that. But anyway, that working with her and doing those plays was a really important part of my childhood and high school experience. And then our high school also had this really sort of modern, progressive drama department called the Performing Arts Curriculum Experience, PACE. And when I was a freshman, I was in band. And I had a bunch of friends in band. I was like, sure, I guess that's what I'll do. And I was playing the trumpet. And the band teacher accused me of, like, pretending to play the trumpet and marching. He's like, you're not really playing. I know that. And I realized, like, this is not for me. I really want to do this high school, this drama department thing. But you had to audition. And to audition, you had to come up with a monologue and then also a movement piece, because there was also this sort of modern dance curriculum. And I wanted to do it bad enough that I was like, I guess I'll try doing this. And I remember sort of getting that together by myself. And I was talking with my parents about it. And my dad was very reticent about it. And I said to him at dinner one time, I was like, Dad, are you afraid that me taking modern dance classes in high school is going to make me gay? And he goes, yes. But I did it anyway, and it didn't take. So anyway, the bug was sort of in me from there, and you want me to really keep going through this sort of traditional trajectory, or?
Again, the show's called AKA I'm Here to Listen. So there'll be times where you'll think I've cut out. I'm not here. And there are times it happened because I was talking to my friend Fred Weller doing one of these, and it cut out every 15 minutes. So it may cut out, and I may have to call you back. But
okay, all right.
So, and this high school is where? Where is this happening?
This is in the suburbs of New York, in Westchester County, in Larchmont, Mamaroneck, where my parents still live. About a mile away from the New Rochelle, I think, but they're healthy, thankfully. Mamaroneck High School is where all this happened. From there, go ahead.
No, I was going to say from there, the college part of it. What takes place there in high school where you start doing plays and whatnot to make you go, I'm going to try to give this a go?
I just really liked doing them. And, these Shakespeare plays, we did these comedies, and, it was was something I felt I was good at, to be honest. And there were so many other kids that were smarter than me and could, like actually read these books and write these papers and, were actually learning Spanish and Spanish class. And that was not really something I was excelling at. And when I got into that sort of the performing arena, for whatever reason, it was something where I was like, wow, I really like doing this, and I feel like I'm good at it. And there wasn't a lot of other things in my life where I felt that way. So I just kind of kept going. And my parents were really encouraging of it. And living in the suburbs of New York, my parents really liked theater, and we would go and see plays all the time. It was just sort of part of our deal. And it was something in our house that had value in a way. And I just got a kick out of it, and was really nurtured by a couple great teachers. And it just was an exciting part of my life and my day to go and do that. So I didn't really have a reason to stop. It wasn't like it's either this or basketball, I didn't have that choice to make. And then from there, I went to the University of Michigan, where my mother and my aunt and my uncle and my brother all went. So that was a little bit of a foregone conclusion for me. I was excited to go there, and didn't plan on studying acting there. I really didn't know what I was going to do. I think it's like, how does any like 17-year-old know, like, well, I think this is what I'm going to do. But took an intro to acting class, and then that wasn't for theater majors. And then a professor from that class called me in my dorm room on the landline, similar to a receiver you're holding now, and said, hey, you should keep going with this. And I was like, oh, okay, that's what I'll do with my life. Didn't take much arm twisting.
And, I mean, you come from, is the family funny? Because you always, like, there's some people who were just, whenever I ran across you, there was always, like, you were thoughtful and smart, but ready to play at a moment's notice if someone even showed an inkling of wanting to do a bit. Were there kids you grew up with who were like, like I had a couple of friends who I made laugh, and, those were my early audiences. Were there people who were like, who you tried the bits on? Was the family funny at dinner,
Yeah. I think my parents, really were funny people and are still are. And there was sort of, we had my mom's best friend and her family were sort of funny, performative people. And at, parties and stuff, there was clearly a value placed on being entertaining and funny, and everyone was sort of participating in that. And my father and his father and mother are from the Midwest, from Nebraska, Iowa, and this sort of droll, waiting in the background for your opportunity to sort of snipe into the conversation with a little quip was a style I observed growing up. But I didn't have a ton of friends in high school or really college that were like, I had camp friends that were like, oh, you're funny, or people on the periphery of my life were always like, you're funny. But I think a lot of the people that I really trusted and was close with, there was also like, shut up, you're annoying, because of the, and I valued that just as much. I was like, I do kind of need people to remind me to shut up every once in a while.
And then after Michigan, where do you decide? You decide to go to New York after that?
Yeah. So I graduated in 1999 and got a gig doing summer stock that summer through a professor of mine at Michigan. And after that, just moved to Brooklyn with a friend from college. He picked the place, and I was talking to him on the phone from this summer stock place in Vermont, and he was like, I think I found a place in downtown Brooklyn. I was like, great. let's do it. Yeah, and moved to New York and just sort of started making mistakes. Started, I'd go to, I did the thing where, you have my horrible black and white headshot, stapling it to my resume and mailing it out and being like, well, it's only a matter of time now. Somebody's going to see this. I really did feel that way. I was like, well, somebody's going to open this envelope and take me with them. I had catering jobs. I catered Saturday Night Live once. And I remember the other guy in the catering group was like, one of the guys in the band asked me for like hot water with lemon. I was like, sure. And the other catering guy was like, don't get it. Don't do it. Because as soon as you do that, they're going to start asking for everything. I was like, that is horrible advice. But he was the slightly more senior caterer. I was like, I guess I can't do it. But maybe this was during your tenure. I don't know. It was Juliana Margulies was the host. It was so exciting for me. And it's so deeply shameful, but I didn't know that's where the gig was. It was just like show up at 30 Rock and go up to whatever, the 8th floor or whatever it is. And I got there. I was like, holy shit, I'm in my shitty little tux catering Saturday Night Live. And so I quickly wrote a sketch on like a pad and stapled my little headshot to it and threw it into Will Ferrell's like quick change dressing room and like wrote my phone number on the bottom and was like, well, listen, it's only a matter of time now. Never heard from them. Never worked that job again either.
Wow, but that is pretty. I mean, that's like out of a movie to a young man to be in New York City, get a catering gig, and the gig is on the 8th floor, which is where they shoot Saturday Night Live.
Yeah.
And then to have and then have this other kind of naysayer like, don't get this guy hot water with lemon, because then you'll have to do your job every day. But then to like have the wherewithal to quickly write a sketch and throw it in Will Ferrell's. Oh man.
Oh my God. I remember the sketch was like about caterers trying to like get on the show. Like, just about that.
And you wrote it by hand?
Yeah.
On the fly.
I wrote it by hand. On the fly. And folded it up and threw it in there. I was like, he's going to read this. And we're going to be on our way.
That's not a bad sketch, though. Caterers trying to get on the show,
I know, yeah.
Oh, man. But, I mean, that's got to be, for somebody growing up, where you did, in New York, to be all of a sudden you are at 30 Rock, in I guess the year 2000-ish. That's cool.
Yeah. It was super cool. And I remember how loud and good the band was. I was like, oh, this is so fucking cool. I don't know how Saturday Night Live does it, that it's still cool. I don't really not that I'm, as a 43-year-old man, an arbiter of cool, but it does seem to hold on to that. I'm like, how did I pull that off? But
well, I mean, the band's great, The band's great, the guests are great, But why didn't you do it again though after that?
They didn't. I think because probably Saturday Night Live was like, don't send that fucking dipshit here again. I would have if they asked me, but I was never invited back to them.
And then you told me once one of the jobs you had is you worked in Al Pacino's office. When did that come about?
I did. That started probably around 2000 or something like that. I had a gig maybe that summer teaching comedy at a day camp to gifted children. And that was a tough gig. It was and the kids were from 6 to 13. And anyway, one of the guys who would give me a ride, it was in the Bronx at Iona, and one of the guys who would give me a ride back into the city had worked for Pacino and was like, hey, I'm leaving. They might need somebody. Do you want me to put in a word? I was like, oh, yeah, sure. And that was another time where I was like, this is it. This is my way into the biz. I'm going to be at the Golden Globes. But yeah, I got that job. He kept a lot of young actors employed. He had a staff of like 6 to 8 guys who were incompetent trying to run his life. And I think it was, whether it was conscious on his part or I don't know, but there was a lot of chaos. If he had hired like one sort of competent person, it might have been a little easier for him. But it was a great job for me. I was originally brought on to be a driver for him, just to drive around the city. And I tried that a few times, and it wasn't quite a match between the two of us. And I called up the guy, the boss, who was actually the guy who ran the show, was actually a great boss and a very competent guy. It was just all the people under him were kind of dopes like me. But I said, why don't you bring me on to help run the office, to be sort of an office assistant with you and kind of be your assistant? And he was like, yeah, that sounds good. So I had a job where I basically answered phones and sort of coordinated schedules and stuff like that at this loft that Al had on Broadway between 18th and 19th. And it was a great job because I could go audition during the day for commercials. I could be like, I'm going to take my lunch now. And he was, there was freedom to do that. And then at night, we used that loft as a rehearsal space for my sketch group at the time, which is how I ended up meeting you.
Two questions off of that. So how do you get an agent at this point in New York City? Because to get commercial auditions, you got an agent. And then how did that sketch group form in New York City?
I got my commercial agent through a friend of mine, Bill Coleus. And I met him through this theater company that I was doing. Before I met you, I was doing a lot of plays downtown, Lower East Side plays, particularly with this one theater company called Inverse Theater Company. That was my sort of other dojo besides the Pit. And met a lot of great people through that. I met them through Backstage. I just went to some open call in Backstage, and Bill recommended me to his agents at Paradigm, and they sent me on one audition. And actually, I had taken Brooke and Mary's class as well. Brooke and Mary Egan. I forget Brooke's last name, but and I go to one audition, and I'm sitting in the waiting room at Melsky when it was, or it might have been Liz Lewis, when it was up on the second floor of some building. And I'm sitting in there, and the casting director comes out of the audition room and says, okay, the SAG strike is on. If you are SAG, you have to leave. And I wasn't SAG. I didn't know anything. And I stayed, and I booked it. And it was a PSA. And then, a couple of days later, I was like, oh, am I a scab? And I felt horribly about it. Still do, but I did it anyway. I asked the producer, I was like, can you pay my nominal fee to the other person in this commercial so that I'm not making money off the strip? And from there got an agent, and then what was your other question? It was how did I get
the sketch group? The sketch group, because I remember you and Ashley Ward and Nate Starkey doing stuff together. How did that come about?
That was also through Backstage. This guy, Chris Blake, was starting an improv or a sketch and improv group. It was before UCB had shown up, and it was before the Pit had shown up. Improv was just sort of starting to happen. I had seen Burn Manhattan and Centralia and was like, holy shit, what is that? That's what I want to do. But there was yet to be the sort of, institutions for it. So I saw that audition and I was like, oh, I definitely want to show up for that. And we did shows as that group for a while, and Chris stopped, and eventually the group became Nate Starkey and Ashley Ward and me and this guy Eric Whippo, a guy named Jack Finnegan, and we would do shows all over at little theaters, the Theatorium in the Lower East Side, places like that. And then UCB was starting, and I was like, I don't want to sign up to take classes. I just got out of college. I'm not going to do that. But you were starting your space, and I met you through Nate, who knew you through Hayden, his Ashley's sister.
That's right. Wow. And then that's how you guys ended up coming over to the 154 West 29th Street space.
Yeah, we were like, oh, this seems like a cool spot, and I guess we did shows. We must have booked the theater to do our shows there, and I met you through that. I don't know if this was a story I saw you do or that Nate told me you did, but you were like, I've been to I've had a lot of different places in my time, but never a place where I could just hit a tennis ball against a wall or something like that. You were very excited that you could play tennis with yourself in that space.
That's right. There's actually a picture of me hitting a tennis ball against the wall at the 154 loft while we're building it. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Al Pacino. I mean, this guy's a living legend. He's Godfather 1 and 2. You're working with him. I mean, you're encountering him. You're talking to him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, that must have been cool for a young person.
Yeah, it was crazy. At first, I remember the first time I was there running the office alone, he called up, and I was like, and all I would do when he called was immediately transfer him to his main assistant. And the first time he called, I just immediately accidentally just hung up on him. I was like, oh, it's not going well. He is a unique individual. He is a person who I think is kind of on the edge of the human experience, and who knows what would have, like a lot of people, I think you and I both know, would have happened to that person if acting wasn't a thing, but it was really fascinating to see that side of show business, to see that side of New York, and to sort of see the inner workings of a person at that level was a really great insight and lesson for me as to what that reality is and if that's really a goal to have,
And you told me once about him that, he doesn't have a lot of like cars or watches or clothes, but he likes to spend money on hiring people. He would just hire a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's true. And, I'm like, I did sign non-disclosure, so I don't like to, but yeah, no, that's true. There was nothing like all that. I thought it was going to be much more interesting than it was, to be honest. It was really just kind of a job and, managing payroll and schedules and things like that. But, yeah, it wasn't like he drove around he was driven around in like a Toyota Land Cruiser. And it wasn't driven by, a professional driver. It was all these different drivers were young actors, trying to figure out their own shit. And he kept a lot of us on. There were like, 3 or 4 drivers. There were guys who helped, manage his house and his apartments. He had a staff in LA as well for when he went out there. So I think that was a sort of generous thing for him. And I think he liked being sort of in touch with people who were at that phase of their life. I think that was helpful for him.
And then you guys, you and Nate and Ashley, you were working together. You were doing your own show at the Pit. I remember there was some sketch where they showed me where you're in a bathtub in a tuxedo, and I hadn't.
Oh, yeah.
And I knew Nate and Ashley through Hayden. And I saw this sketch, and I thought it was funny. And then the next time where I felt like there was another layer of us connecting was you and Bob Wiltfong did a pilot. Mm-hmm. Remember that?
Sure, yeah. That was sort of my other avenue at the Pit, was all the work I did with my dear Bob Wiltfong.
And how did you meet him?
I met him through Neutrino, actually. And I really got to know him one year at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival when I was there with a play and he was there with Neutrino. And I sort of knew Ptolemy just from around the Pit and Kurt Brunel a little bit. And they invited me generously to play with them in some of their Neutrino shows in Edinburgh. And I met Bob through that. And we kind of hit it off. He's from Omaha, and I have like relatives in Omaha, and he used to be a newscaster. My brother is a newscaster, so we kind of had a lot in common in that way, and just sort of what we thought was funny. We both kind of look alike in a way, so we started working together, doing this like fake professional opportunities workshop. That was like one of our bits. That was a show Bob came to me with, and then we worked on it together. He followed up with me after Edinburgh, I'm remembering now, sent me that script, and we sort of worked on it together. And then from there, that New York Television Festival thing was just starting. And we were like, yeah, let's make something. So we made something with Kevin Scott called The Weatherman Boys, where we played two brothers competing to take over our retiring dad's slot as a weatherman, and we were both named Matt and Bob Weatherman. It was really fun to do. I mean, the pilot's obviously like a mess, but it was a lot of fun to do.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, Jason Jones played a part in it. I mean, there were a lot of great people in it, but and we were doing some scene around a conference table, and Jason Jones was like, do you think you guys got enough coverage? And we were like, yeah. And Bob and I remember we were arguing on the way back about whether we got enough coverage. And then I asked Bob, I'm like, wait, do either of us know what coverage is? And he was like, I really don't. So that's how that pilot went.
But I do remember, Jason Jones is, another naturally funny guy, hard worker, Samantha Bee's partner, and Kristen Shaw was in it as well. How did you know Kristen Shaw and Jason Jones? Because obviously you guys had an eye for talent to get these two folks early on in their careers.
Jason, Bob knew, because Bob was at the Daily Show then, and I think so. I don't know if Jason was on the Daily Show yet, or if Bob just knew him through Samantha Bee or what. But Bob, that was Bob's hookup, and then Kristen I met, I think, through you, because around this time is when you said, there's this group Big Black Car, and there's a couple people who are missing for the summer or something, and maybe you could guest with them. You sort of were generous enough to connect me with them, and I tried to play it cool, but I was really excited about that. And so I showed up in their group and started rehearsing with them and doing shows with them, and then just never left. And I met Kristen through them.
Yeah, I remember that, because that was a time where I've always been kind of clueless, but that was at a time where at the Pit where I thought I could just say, hey, Matt Oberg and Kristen Shaw is going to be playing with you guys, and didn't think like that was a deal. And then Nate was like, hey, okay, but it'd be better if you asked us in the future.
But Nate wasn't in the group then. I brought Nate into Big Black Car.
Chris Cornelia?
Or something, probably.
But I remember I remember somebody saying to me, like, in a way, it was like, okay, kind of like Dad, but, you know, it's our team now. You know, like, I was just like, well, yeah, but, I mean, we put you together, you're a house team, and I'd come from Sharna at IO where she just put people on teams and took people off. And so that's why I just thought, and I tell people, I said, that was like probably the last time I could just put people on teams without asking them. You know, it was the first time I had a sense of losing.
You had a knack for it.
Well,
I mean, that push and pull between who's really driving this team bus, that was always present there. And, you know, there was the great slacks, you know, debate of whatever 2005. It was you were really wanted people to wear a trouser on stage. If you're a theater, you're entitled to that act, but there was some pushback, you know.
But that also came from Sharna, where she's like, I don't like shorts in shows, you know. So again, a lot of my stuff is just like delved in, like people chewing gum in scenes because it took away from their energy. So all of a sudden I was like, gum is a pet peeve of mine now. And when you're like, and that's the kind of thing of going back over, you're like, where do I get these things from? It's like, I heard someone else who ran a theater and I was an apprentice, and then all of a sudden it becomes a thing. But somehow, I mean, and I remember distinctly, I mean, Liz Kukowski was playing with you guys too, but I remember distinctly just thinking like I could just put people on teams. And Eckert was on the team, Keneally was on the team, Tom Ridgely, Ellie Kemper, and maybe Arian, and then Fred Weller played for a minute. But I think at that point I was just it was kind of made clear to me that I needed to ask people on teams if I could, you know, put people on teams. But I felt pretty good about my decision.
Yeah, I am too. I'm happy that realization hadn't occurred yet, because it was big for me.
To me, it just seemed like, these are two very funny people, you and Kristen. I was like, they should be playing with you guys. You're the best team. And part of what, you know, the role of someone who oversees a theater is to put people together, you know, and connect them and say, you should do something together. You guys would be good together, you know. But then you guys became friends and became Big Black Car and BBC, and seemed like you had a nice long run at the Pit doing shows.
Definitely. It was great. It was, you know, every week we'd show up and there would be people there. And we were there as the, you know, theater moved to the new space and people showed up there. It was such a huge constant in my life. I'm very grateful to you and everyone there that made that happen.
Well, I mean, I like to think it's symbiotic. You know, things like that, it's win-win. Like I said, I've been to these spaces, all four of them now, including the original Pit, when there's no one there, and I'm like, oh, this is just a loft on the second floor of a building. That's all this is.
You got to get out the tennis racket, man. That's the beginning.
I have, man. Believe me. I've gotten out the tennis racket. I've been shooting hoops there a few times, making some videos. I'm just walking around. I'm going like, But also, what it is also doing for me, I've lost the attachment to them as spaces. You know, and the goal of a landlord is that you get attached to your space, and then you don't want to let it go, and then they ever so slightly edge up the rent, and you're willing to pay it because it's just the perfect amount up. But 2 months plus of not being in there now, I'm like, they're just spaces, and there won't be.
Yeah, I mean, I can't. This is a particularly horrible time for. I think about you and those places. Excuse me. That's a non-COVID cough I have, but you know, friends of mine who have restaurants and you, it's just, that sucks, man. I don't know what else to say besides that.
But even as you're saying that, all I can think about is someone coming out and going, okay, it'd be great if you guys, whenever you cough, just said it's a non-COVID cough, all right? We're trying to get this restaurant back off the ground. We're trying to make something happen. Look, guys, I know I'm just the manager, but if you could just say this is a non-COVID cough, anytime you cough, it would help me out.
Yeah, it's been a very tricky time to have just a viral cough. I got the test. I caught it from my 3-year-old, but we were like, oh, she definitely has to have it. This definitely has to be it. But everybody got the swab, which goes, have you had it? It goes up to your brain. It is very uncomfortable.
Yeah, but I mean, to me, it's like I'd rather just play with people. Like, you know, I know and all this stuff is going on, and I'll deal with it when it happens. But I'd rather just do bits and play because there's nothing I can do right now.
Yeah.
I mean, and you and Wildfong. I mean, I through Instagram or whatever, Facebook and stuff. I try to keep track of folks. But I mean, I think of that cast now of you and Wildfong and Jason Jones and Kristen Shaw, and I'm like, that is a sitcom cast on a network show. Any network would be lucky to have that as the core of a cast on a show right now. I guess it's just luck.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think if we had known a little bit more about what we were doing or had someone around who had done it before, it might have gone a different way. But I have no regrets about that. You know, and there's definitely like funny bits in that little pilot we made. But yeah, I mean, there's so many great people that came out of there, and you know, who knows? Maybe we'll sell it next year.
And how much longer did you stay in New York after that? Because I mean, I remember at a certain point, people started making the exodus to L.A. You know.
Yeah, I wasn't in like the first wave. I think Kristen Shaw went before I did. I think I started coming out here for pilot season, and you know, was kind of running out of jobs to get in New York. At the time, there wasn't really a ton to do there. You know, I was like, well, I'm not on Saturday Night Live. I'm not on The Daily Show. I want to work. I did a lot of commercials were my bread and butter for a long time, but coming out here for pilot season, I was like, oh, it's just all here. In New York, it felt like an abstraction to have a career as an actor or a writer. But you come to LA and it's like, oh, this is what everyone's doing here. You go over there and get good at it, and then someone will pay you to do it. It wasn't like, oh, I guess maybe someday I'll be struck by lightning and have a career. Here it was just much more realistic and exciting. It was hard to move. My parents are still in the suburbs there, and I moved right as there we go. As we were about to have our first baby, so that was really hard. But overall, I think it was the right thing to do.
And then, I mean, looking you up, like I said, I mean, when I've done this thing where I've talked to people on the phone, I've never looked you up before on Wikipedia or IMDb, but you've done a lot of stuff, you know, a lot of roles, like I said, just knocking on heaven's door, where, you know, these gigs you've gotten, you know, where, you know, even Ugly Americans, you know, that's where you're playing the lead of a Comedy Central animated show. These things are coming about just through an audition process?
Yeah, pretty much. I think the first gig I got that was like kind of a level up for me was this show, The Onion Sports Dome, that was on Comedy Central for one season out of New York. And I got an audition for that. I got a manager through Bob Wilfong, Vincent Nastry, who was Bob's manager at the time. I started working with him, and he got me that audition. I sort of knew some of the casting people at Comedy Central by then, just from like going on auditions. And I had done, I think, one like bit for the Onion website, and that Onion Sports Room to play like a fake Sports Center anchor. I knew that was like, I was like, this is possible for me. I look right for this. I'm kind of right for this. So I really worked hard on that audition, and it was just like reading, you know, jokes in a really dry, kind of quick way. And I remember being like, you know, buckle down on this because you could do this. You know, there's sometimes where it feels like, oh, this is really, there's not a lot of people who fit this better than I do. So that was big for me. And I think after that, I got Ugly Americans. That was also through an audition, and sort of Yeah, it was a cartoon playing the guy, the sort of straight man at the center of this crazy world. But yeah, I've never been like offered a job every once in a while, but it was never like, is Matt Oberg available? It's always like, show up at 10:30 and do your best, and we'll see.
So, I mean, something like comedians. I mean, that seemed like, with Martin Short and Stephanie Weir, that seemed like something that was a big deal, another level up type thing.
Yeah, it was a Billy Crystal. It was not a Martin Short. But
I'm sorry, Billy Crystal. I apologize, Billy. My bad. If you're listening.
Yeah.
And Martin, if you are listening, you're welcome.
Yeah. Yeah, that was just a straight up audition process. I went in. I think Allison Jones, the famed comedy casting director, brought me in for that, and I got a call back for that at Billy Crystal's production company office over in Beverly Hills, and he was there in the callback, and Larry Charles, who's this guy's sort of comedy guru who directed a lot of Seinfeld and directed the Borat movie and stuff like that. And it was, one of those moments where you have to kind of, the whole exercise is just staying calm. And somehow I was able to do that. So that was a great gig. And that was another show that was just like one season, but it was a ton of fun. Stephanie Weir is so funny, and it was great to work with her. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I remember it was on FX, and John Landgraf is the guy who runs FX, and this was before Netflix was really happening, and he came up to us at one lunch break when we were shooting it. It was me and Stephanie and Megan Ferguson, who was an actress on the show, and unprompted, he says to us, he's like, I've been in this business, 30 years, and I know a hit, and this is a hit. And we're like, holy shit, here we go. And then, immediately it stumbled out of the gate. We're like, oh, okay. So it was shortly after that, he delivered, a keynote speech at some conference to the TV industry where he was like, there is officially too much television. And that was 5-6 years ago. I don't know how long that was.
And then, Stephanie Weir was in my level 1 class that I taught, and it was one of those situations where I was like, you should be doing this, and you're going to leapfrog me, but I'll do the best I can to watch you do scenes.
Yeah.
And Jack McBrayer. So good. Yeah, and Jack McBrayer was on one of the first teams I coached, another one where I was like, okay, yeah, you will leapfrog me, and that's okay.
Yeah, he's a dear friend too. He's good.
And so you met him through Nate and Ashley as well when you guys started working together.
Yeah, I met him through Ashley, who grew up with him. Yeah, and it was another one where oh, this guy's on a rocket to the moon. He was just, so funny, so fast, and liquid comedy. Still is.
And so, you do gigs like the Real O'Neills, and where you're in. I watch those scenes on YouTube, and you're in there with everybody. You're right there playing the love interest. It's just and 9 pilots. Is that a serious number, or are you just throwing that out?
It's something like that.
Wow.
I am. It's around there. Yeah.
And you just got another one for this season. But you haven't shot it yet.
Haven't shot it yet. This one was one where I was booked as a guest star to come in and just do the pilot and maybe recur after that. We'll see. And it was a thing where they're doing a rehearsal for the table read. All these pilots, they have a table read at the network usually, where the room is full of 200 people who work at ABC. I'm like, what do all of these people do? And they all have the power to fire me, but they wanted to rehearse the script before that table read, which makes sense. But they were like, look, it's just a guest star thing. You don't have to show up if you don't want to. you're not getting paid. So if you don't want to go, don't go. And my parents were in town, and I was like, oh, I should probably be with them. But it was really only like 2 hours around lunch. I was like, oh, I'll go. And I went, and it went well, my little scene. And then I got a call that was like, they want to bump you up to a series regular. I was like, oh, wow. Great. Yeah, I was like, oh, there's a lesson to just like, when in doubt, show up.
Well, I mean, that's interesting because, one of the things about talking to folks is to go through these bifurcation points of their lives, these people they met, but also little lessons along the way. And, like when I was talking to Neil Flynn, he was talking about how his role as the janitor on Scrubs was one line in the pilot. And, at a place in his career, he could have easily said, yeah, I'm not doing one line in your pilot. But he was like, yeah, sure. And that led to him being on the show for 9 years. He got bumped up to series regular in year 2. And from year 2 to 9, he was a series regular. So, I mean, just showing up to that thing and being like, yeah, I'm going to go, to the table read. And now, are you at liberty to say what type of show it is, or is there an NDA involved? And who's involved?
I don't think so. I don't know, maybe. But it's a show called Prospect for ABC. It's about a young female teacher who shows up in this old West gold rush town to ostensibly teach the kids of the town, but when she gets there, she realizes she's teaching like these sort of illiterate adults in the town. And my relationship with this cast in this show is the one table read I went to, so I don't even know everybody's name who's in it. So I'm not going to do a great job promoting it. I think the most famous person in it is David Allen Greer, but we'll see. I think ABC is supposed to do their virtual upfront next week, so I think they'll make an announcement soon what they're going to do. But I don't think they're going to shoot any pilots this year. They just ordered more scripts, and we'll make the decision from there.
So with something like that, even with that, your agent or manager is calling you and saying you've got an audition. You go in for one audition. And then from there, how many pieces of the puzzle until you're at that table read? 2 auditions, a callback? How does it go from there for the the civilians out there?
Well, for a series regular part, all these network sitcoms are one of the few things in my experience in showbiz that still has a very routine sort of rhythm to it, that how this process is going to go, the timeline. But for these series regular parts and pilots, the very first step is get an audition with the casting director. And then you go from there, there's a callback with the producers. And from there, if you make the next cut, it's a test. And the test can be, there's a network test and there's a studio test. So sometimes that's sort of changing now, where it used to be you had to get past the studio test and then go to the network test. And it used to always be with people in the room. And it depended on the studio or the network what kind of a room it was. Like I did a pilot with Ellen DeGeneres, and it was at Warner Brothers. And the test there was in this big office. And there's a bunch of executives and writers and producers sitting around this office. And at ABC, I tested for Modern Family way back when, that they have this little non-COVID cough. Here we go. There it is. That's so gross. I'm sorry. But they have a little black box theater that you do it in. And from there, it used to be you would do the studio test and then don't go far, because we're going to call back half of you or 2 of you to go on to the network test. So that would be that day. You'd go sit in your car and wait for your phone to ring. And then you do the network test, and you hear, maybe a couple days after that. And you have to sign your contract at the network test. You sign a 7-year contract. Everybody does. All the deal points are all worked out, and you sign it, and then you go in.
So roughly 4 to 5 sessions times doing the sides or the audition piece until you are at that table read, you know.
Yeah, something like that.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like a very cool. It's a period piece, I guess. You know, it sounds like David Allen Greer's another naturally funny guy. You know, so it sounds like there's a cool concept.
Yeah, I think so. It's these two writers, Sherry Bilsing and Ellen Creamer, I think her last name is. But
Leghorn?
they wrote on. No, not her. But they wrote on Friends. I did another pilot with them a couple of years ago. And, I think, you know, it's always like reading tea leaves at this time of year for the pilots to be like, well, this one's got this and this one's got that. And I've learned that it's like impossible to handicap these things. But I do think one thing it has going for it is that it's a period comedy and will not have to address the reality of masks and coughing. So in that way, it kind of has an advantage to be like, oh, you can go back to a time where we didn't know this was going to happen.
Right. That is an advantage. When I was talking to my friend Fred Weller, who he and I went to college together, and he's done a lot of stuff, I said, at this point in your career, if you could wave a magic wand and do a show, do you want to be a fake cop? Do you want to be a fake lawyer? Do you want to be a fake, what kind of fake TV show? And he said, well, both my parents were attorneys in New Orleans. I wouldn't mind being a DA in a New York City procedural. Do you have thoughts like that? Like if you could wave a magic wand, the environs or the frame of the show that you'd like to be in?
Why doesn't he want to be a DA in a New Orleans procedural? That's my question.
I guess because he lives in New York City, and he wants to be picked up at his home in New York, taken to a studio.
Yeah.
You know, so some of this at this point just becomes like, what's the easiest life you envision for yourself? Not going to New Orleans.
That's a huge part of it for me. One of the pilots I did was produced by Amy Poehler with Carol Burnett in it, and I was like, this has got to go. And it was a multicam, but it was still like kind of had a cool pedigree. And that, in terms of logistics and schedule, is so ideal. It was shot at Universal, which is, you know, Universal Studios. It's 15 minutes away from where I live. And a multicam schedule for actors, you rehearse it during the week, like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, just like in the morning. And then they go and like block it and fix the script in the afternoon. And then on Thursday and Friday, you shoot it and you're done. You're always going to that one place. Like those procedurals, you're working, you know, I mean, not that you can complain about these things, but there's super long days and you know, you're going all over the place. But so logistically, that would be cool.
But I mean, that's pretty cool.
You know,
Amy Poehler and Carol Burnett. I mean, for her to be able to put an idol of hers into a show, and then you were acting with Carol Burnett and working with Amy.
Yeah.
Oh man,
that
is
like
cool.
A family moves into a house where the only way they can afford it is if they let the old crazy actress live there until she dies. And it was me and this actor, Mary Holland, played my wife, and she's so funny. And it was really exciting. It was like, oh, this one's got to go, but it didn't. But it was a really fun experience. So I think for me right now, the dream would be a show that I'm writing on, that have like come up with, that I'm acting on, like number 4 in the call sheet or something like that. That to me seems like a great deal, where you're writing it, you have like some control over how this is working, and then you get to do your own bit sort of one day a week, but you're not the center of the cast or like, you know, have the burden of being, you know, the sort of star. That's what I'm working towards at the moment.
Right, but also to go a little further, I mean, to clarify, what I meant, like, you know, when you did The Weatherman, it was set in a television station, right? The sports thing was set in the sports thing. is there a world that you like encompassing, that you're like, that, again, like, you remember J.D. Durkin, who used to do stuff at the Pit? I don't know if you were around.
Yeah, I remember him.
Well,
he's now like
JD,
a reporter, right?
Right. But J.D. always wanted to be, he's like, I want to be a comedian. I want to work for the Colbert Show. I said, and I would always say to him, J.D., you sound like a newscaster. Why aren't you just doing fake news stuff? That's your sweet spot. And then ultimately he became, like, he works for Cheddar and he's a newscaster. He got to marry his love of, the news and politics and whatnot with his, like, natural ability to sound like, Ted Baxter, So
yeah.
I guess that's what I'm asking is, like, is there a world, in a world, is that world a news station? Is that world a high school? Is it a,
I think that world is in, I don't know if you're familiar with this particular sort of slice of life, but there's these shops in New York where 60% of it has to be legitimate videos and 40% of it is allowed to be adult entertainment. Is that the percentage breakdown? Was it 60-40?
I think it's a 60-40, yeah. 60-40. It used to be. They're not even allowed anymore, I don't think. But, yeah.
The 60-40s are gone now. I mean, even if they were allowed, who is showing up at those places? You might as well.
No internet connection. No VCR, DVD player.
Yeah. What is in the space that Schmidio Video was in now? Like a wholesaler or?
It was very close. It was scarves and sunglasses wholesale, but went out about 3 months ago. And prior to this virus happening, I had been talking to the landlords, and we negotiated a deal memo for us to take it over. And I had sworn I would never do another bricks and mortar. And mind you, this is BC world. And then I get a text from the landlord who says, Ali, the scarf store is available. And I was like, oh no. So I'm like, I almost was like, I got to do this. I got to put something.
What were you going to sell out of there?
Well, I was going to probably put a speakeasy where the front 15 feet was something, and then the back 75 feet was going to be a speakeasy, craft cocktails, jazz, a little stand-up stage, a piano. And the front, the different ideas I had for the front were basically 5 fridges, and you would just go to the refrigerator and open it up, and it would have just like, the top items, like 2 kinds of pints of ice cream, mozzarella sticks, juices. So you'd be shopping out of fridges. Or a barber shop, or a candy store, but something where or the other thing I had in the first 15 feet where I just had a neon sign that said, unlicensed life coach. And I would just office out of there, and, people could come in, first session free, 20 minutes.
Yeah. I would show up. That's a cool idea.
I don't know if I would sign a lease right now if it didn't have a pandemic clause, and I don't know if a landlord would put that in a lease because they really just believe they deserve rent no matter what. And so that's tricky. It's tricky.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I like talking to people. I loved Larry King when I was a kid, so I'd love listening to him talk to people on my car radio.
I was in Vegas one time at the ATM, and there's this guy like hovering too close behind me, you can feel it, like that's not an appropriate distance. And I turn around, it's Larry King, and I get my money out of the ATM, and I turn around and hold up the money to him, and I go, I won. And he laughed. I was like, that's very good.
That's nice, man. But there's so many vehicles I could see you in. I could see you in, like, a WKRP type situation. I could see you in a sports night situation. I could see you in substitute teachers or a teacher type situation. I could see you in, like, a law firm,
I get cast as vice principal has been my sweet spot for a while.
Yeah, there's so many things where I think you'd add just the perfect spice for that type of role. Well, that's good that you're writing for yourself now and building your own boat.
Yeah, it's been really rewarding, and it's like, oh yeah, I can do this. This isn't that hard, you know. It was intimidating at first to be like, well, how do you get to the end of one of these things? But once you do, you're like, oh, you just kind of stick with it and you get there. It's not that hard. I write with a writing partner, which helps a lot.
Is that somebody I know or no?
No, it's an old theater friend of mine, this guy Jody Lambert.
Jody Lambert. If you had to, like, you've done a lot of acting, both on stage and in film. Do you have a process at this point when you get a script? How do you approach that? You get your audition sides, and here it is.
No. Every time, like before they're about to roll, I always think to myself, and sometimes I'll do this. I am very guilty of having like 10 gags that I just repeat over and over again. But I'll, like, right before they're about to roll, I'll look to whoever I'm doing the scene with, and I'll be like, how do you do acting? No, I don't have a process. I mean, TV, in my experience, moves so quickly that you're just relying on your instincts. You don't have time to be like, and if I was playing, a real like meaty drama role, I guess I'd have to figure something out. But I do not have a conscious like approach to material. Only in an audition when I'm like working. That's the most I ever like work on something. And it's just like, how loud do I do this?
And the learning of the lines, the memorizing, that comes pretty easy to you, always has, or you work on it?
You get better at it, but it's definitely something I do for auditions. I have to memorize it, but I don't know how people do it when they're kind of reading it. But I think a pitfall that I fall into is I kind of go too fast because, or not too fast, but I'm just not wanting to forget my lines a lot of times in an audition. I'm just like, ooh, I did it. I got through it without forgetting anything. And that's not really the goal. So I'm working on kind of calming down about that.
I mean, and you always seem to be comfortable on stage. Have you always been comfortable just being up there, not caring what people think and being silly and whatever?
I guess, yeah. I haven't really thought about it. I think a lot of it is your relationship with the audience, maybe, if this is like a pompous thing to talk about, but the way you feel about the audience is kind of the way they're going to feel about you in a way. It's sort of like people can feel it. And that's something I've always enjoyed exploring, if that answers your question.
Are there people out there that you still keep in touch with and see, Nate and Ashley and Bob, or are they still all out there?
Sure, yeah. Bob recently moved to Florida, so I don't see him as much. But
wow.
We chat every once in a while. Yeah, let the grass grow. They're constantly shucking and jiving. But I see Nate and Ashley a lot, or I used to, and Kristen Shaw and her husband Rich and their daughter, they actually live right up. We almost share a backyard, and in this pandemic time, us and a few other neighbors get the kids out and we do our howl a little earlier at 6:30. So we hear her howl, and then if we scurry up this one little hill in our backyard and they scurry down to the bottom of their hill, we can see each other through a neighbor's fence. So we've been doing that.
Wow.
Yeah. Kristen cool. and my wife went to college together too.
So is that how you knew her, to put her in your pilot?
No, because I don't think I had met Liz, my wife, then. I don't remember how she was just like a funny person who was around. I don't know how I don't do that.
Wow, that's funny. Prior to this, I was thinking about maybe trying to do something in Los Angeles. I always toyed with the idea of a La Pit, But it seems like
Right.
it's a tough place, especially with this pandemic now, to do any kind of space. Are there places for you to get up on stage and play?
Not really. We tried when we first got out here as like Nate and Ashley and Chris Grace and I, but we realized quickly that like the venue that you provided was really valuable and the audience that you provided was really valuable. And that takes a lot of time to build. And I don't think we were really ready to start that process in the beginning. Scott Eckert too. So we kind of walked away from it. And there's a lot more opportunities here for other sort of outlets for your kind of comedic mojo here in terms of writing and, you know, selling your talent is where you can put more of your energy out here, but marketing. But I think that was part of our issue at the beginning. And also it is harder to get people to go out here. It's America here, and it's not New York, you know. It's a different animal. And not to say that it's impossible, but I think it's a challenge to create a loyal and dependable audience out here that shows up like IRL. Parking is it's all of it, you know.
Right. When you've been on stage, are there people you've been on stage with where you've been like, wow, they are good, I am running with wolves here? Or people you acted opposite?
Yeah, sure. I mean, almost everybody. I'm always like, wow, they are so. What's great is when you when people get better too. Like you go away for a while and you come back and you're like, ooh, I mean, I haven't done improv in a long time, but I remember feeling that way about, you know, everybody, Nate or Ashley or Justin Aiken or, you know, Ellie Kemper or whoever, to see them, you know, make a move. You're like, God, that is so funny. And that is not a move you used to make. You know, that was always really exciting for me to see when, you know, you get to know these people as performers so well, but when they, you know, sort of find a new lane, it's exciting. Kevin Scott's one of those people too, who's constantly kind of getting better somehow. I worked with him a lot in New York too, and I've always admired his ability to do that.
It was kind of a magical time there, the Pit, you know, from when it opened in 2002 until we closed that space. I mean, it felt to me like a golden era of like I could, you know, having been at Second City during the 90s and been kind of aware of like I was in a golden era because of, you know, Colbert, Sedaris, Carell, Pasquazi, you know, all these people on stage and around. I just felt like when it happened again in 2002 at the Pit, I was like, oh, somehow someone has not scooped up all these people and they're doing stuff here. I don't know. It was just fun. It was, you know, it was a very, you know, time of innocence for me where I was just like, you know, got the keys to a loft I could hit a tennis ball in.
Yeah. I always, you know, you see those like black and white pictures, these 8x10s of like Second City groups with like Colbert and Carell. And then there's like two people in the back who you've never heard of. And I'm always like, who are those people? Where are they now? You know, that's a bigger part of the story to me.
Yeah. I mean, they're out there, but they were, you know, they're a part of that. And I guess, you know, it's funny because the people in the know those people. It's luck, maybe luck and hard work. I mean, one thing I talked to Tom Purcell, who's a head writer for Colbert, and he was just like, they just worked harder. People like Colbert and Tina, they were always doing stuff and working. So I think that's important. They just, you know, not to say the other people you mentioned who we don't know who they are didn't work as hard, but that combination of hard work, talent, and luck. Because I'm talking to Keckner to talk to Keckner this week too, Dave Keckner, and I was watching a video about how Colbert credits Keckner with his whole career because he basically told him that Robert Smigel was looking at it for him for the Dana Carvey show. And to have a career.
Yeah. I think it's also the people who really want it more, too, are the people who work harder. The people who are like, I can take it or leave it. They're a little less motivated to, burn the midnight oil. So, and like the people who in the background of those Second City group photos or whatever photo, they're not like, living in a sewer somewhere. They're probably happy people just with something else going on. I think it's important to remember.
I had this bit once of going back and finding all the stand-ups who were doing bits about Zuma, that liquor, that mixed drink.
Zima.
And then just going and finding them now and being like, what's up? Just like a documentary about guys who were very Zima heavy in their stand-up in the heyday of stand-up.
That's funny.
And just being like,
I think it's like an Adam Sandler joke. Excuse me, like when somebody's smoking behind you and you go, excuse me, I ordered a Zima, not an emphysema.
Well, thank you, man. It's great catching up with you. I don't know when our paths will cross again.
No.
But, I thank you for your time, and really meant a lot that, you were willing to take some time out and return my phone call.
I'm honored that you thought of me. I am thinking of you in this difficult time. I hope that whatever emerges from this chaos is even bigger and better somehow than what it was before, or smaller and better, or whatever. But I, along with a lot of other people who were lucky enough to come through your doors, are thinking of you in this time. So I appreciate you reaching out to me, and we're thinking of you, and fucking good luck.
Well, do me a favor and say hi to anybody who remembers me still out there, and maybe they'd be interested in talking as well. And, make sure that is a non-COVID related cough. But if when I come
are you going to edit those out?
No, my God, I haven't even posted one of these yet. I got to figure out how to post them. At this point, this is it's just a phone call. By the way, I have to tell you, this phone call has been recorded for quality purposes. And would you be cool with this phone call being brought to you by Fresca? Is that something you're okay with?
I love Fresca. Do you like Fresca?
I love it. And I got, during the pandemic, I got really into Fresca for like simple pleasures. And I was like, I might as well start talking about Fresca, and maybe Fresca will eventually go, okay. I got into Fresca.
We hear you.
I got into
Fresca somehow is often at like craft services. I'm like, really? Fresca? Yeah, I don't know why. It's usually around.
I can't find it. Like, there are places where I'm like, how could Fresca not be between 5 to 6 feet? It is a solid, carbonated diet beverage. And I also was getting into Goya lentils. Are you cool with this Goya lentils being involved in this?
I mean, it's not my go-to lentil brand. But is this a dry lentil we're talking about?
Dry lentil. But hey, look, if you've got a different go-to lentil brand, I'm just looking for people who are like, hey, we heard you did something where you mentioned us.
Yeah. I shot a Walmart commercial in this very room I'm in now that I think is dropping today.
Wow. Is that what, are you wearing a face mask?
No. I shot it on my iPhone. I was the only one in here. And they had it was through Funny or Die, but they're all like on a Zoom watching me shoot the thing.
Interesting, man. Wow, you can't keep a good man down. Well, all right, my man. Say hi to anybody who still remembers me, and thank you for talking, and you have a great day and stay safe, brother.
I will. You too. Take care. And if and when you're calling upon the old roster of dingalings to do something to, raise awareness of a reopening or whatever, I'm here.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate it.
Okay. All right.
Take care now.
Okay, you too.
All righty. That was Matt Oberg. You've probably seen him in a ton of stuff. I may not know his name, but I have no doubt this dude will eventually be on a TV show that goes for a long time. Very funny. Good guy, naturally funny, works hard. lucky to have him be a part of the pit in the early aughts between 2002 and I guess roughly 2010. Because that's when we let go of the 154 West 29th Street space because there were no sprinklers, and the landlord said, put them in or get out. And I said, well, I don't have a lease, and I can't put them in. At least I have a lease, and so it goes. Well, if you're still listening, thank you, and please check out the pit-nyc.com for classes online, and hopefully someday IRL in the real world. Yeah. Spread the word. Depending on when you're listening to this, good night, or sweet dreams, or good morning, or good afternoon. I hope it finds you healthy. If you're not healthy, I hope you get healthy. Once you get healthy, I hope you appreciate your health. Stay safe, safe travels, and until we meet again in the real world, so long.
Thanks for listening to Global Comedy Studios. Is this a bad time to talk? Stay tuned for more.